And then Miss Iris says, I'm trying to understand why questions leading to this narrative wouldn't be recorded down, and you start question one in the middle of a long narrative. Surely there must have been a few questions that would have led him to this narrative in all these paragraphs. And I'm paraphrasing here. And Ms. Zahara says, different IOs have different styles of writing reports. This is the style we went with, to which there were some reactions from the audience. The prosecution did ask to clarify their case. Did you ask any questions in the narrative section and of the report? And I'm paraphrasing here, in a way that would frame Iris Co. And Ms. Zahara is like, no. Mr. Chor also says, do you agree that in the statement you have recorded, there is no record of any fake vaccination put up by myself or Dr. Kwa? And Ms. Zahara replies, if Mr. Cedric would have mentioned it to me, I would have put it up. But since there is nothing in the statement, I believe that Mr. Cedric did not mention this to me. And Mr. Chor, satisfied, goes, that's all, Your Honor. Ms. Iris said, would you agree with me that the proper way to conduct this interview would be questions and answers? And I'm paraphrasing here. And Ms. Zahara said, yes, it would be. And Ms. Iris says half of the statement before question one, which is half the statement, was just a narrative, just paragraphs. Ms. Zahara didn't understand the question, and she replied with, yes, the narrative is there. Hey friends, welcome back. This is Zephyr. This is part 2 of the courtroom highlights for the Iris Co and Gypsum Kwa case for the date of 15 September 2025. And these are just the highlights. I'll publish the full transcript, or all my notes at least, of whatever I managed to take down on my own in a handwritten fashion, because that's what's allowed on my blog. So check it out there. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll link that article in the description. Here's some of the highlights. So 3 p.m. we resumed session, and Miss Iris clarified with the judge that she is not making an application for a Mackenzie friend. Now, Mackenzie friend is a legal term for somebody who helps out during a court case. You can read more about that on Google. Initially, I thought it was a friend who works at the company McKinsey, which is hilarious. The judge says that Mr. Chong will deal with the matters brought up to you, Miss Iris, at a later time. So earlier in the day, if you remember, I mentioned that Miss Iris brought up something quite stunning in court. I believe she might publish that herself because she's very active on her socials. So do look out for that. Maybe I will share that if she does publish on socials. So check out my socials as well. I might even wholesale copy that post if she does it, or if she shares that at some point in this proceedings, because she does share a lot. Put it on my blog and credit her. The judge was referring to that and told Miss Iris that Mr. Chong, the prosecution, will deal with the matters brought up by you, referring to that speech in the early half of the day, at a later time. But I'd like to assure you that in the meantime, this trial is presided by me, independent of any action by these courts, the High Court, or any other party. The first witness that Mr. Chong called was Miss Zahara Binte Ibrahim, and she spelled that out, which I told you guys in an earlier video. The only difference is that there's a H after her name. So it's ZAHARAH space BINTE space IBRAHIM. She's currently an investigation officer with EGDA, and I'm familiar with EGDA because my daughter is 6. All right, guys, let's continue. This lighting would have to do. The prosecution asked Ms. Zahara what her occupation was in 2022, and she proceeds to say that in 2022, she's an investigation officer with the Ministry of Health. The prosecution leads into the question, do you recall a Lim Junzi Cedric Mohammed Daniel Lim, which is the witness's name, who was the subject of a lot of examination and cross-examination a couple of weeks ago? And Ms. Zahara said, yes, I believe he's the witness I recorded a statement from. They talk about formalities like the date, when was it recorded, so on and so forth. And so the prosecution asks a bunch of questions which are rather straightforward, like dates, times, confirming, and so on. He confirms the identity of the main IO in this case, which is Ms. Zahara's words. Mr. Brian sought my assistance to record an interview for Mr. Cedric Lim. And the prosecution says, was this a Tan Chia Hui Brian? TANJIAHUIBRIAN. And Ms. Zahara says, yes, it was. And so they move on with the conversation, what her conversation was with Mr. Brian. And you can check this out on my blog, which I'll be publishing there. Because it's too much for a video, it'll become a 1-hour-long video. I'll pick out key moments for you guys. Prosecution asked a little bit about her remembering how Mr. Lim got to the Harbourfront office of the Ministry of Health, and she was like, nope. And they carry on for a while. He asked if Mr. Cedric was feeling well and if he was in a state to give the statement, and Ms. Zahara said yes. They carry on further, checking the timings of the statements. He asked about the manner of the conversation, and Ms. Zahara said, I spoke to him in a conversational manner, and I asked about all this to have an overview, and then I recorded it down, and then I would repeat it to him, and then he confirmed it to be accurate and true. Talking about the amendments and possible cancellations and signatures and things like that. For certain pages and paragraphs, He took her back and forth, making sure at every point whose signature was written there, whose cancellation marks, whose words in case there were corrections and amendments, and so on, just to make everything crystal clear. And so it goes on and on for a while. And in the end, the prosecution asked, did Cedric affirm that all statements were his and were true? Ms. Zahra says, yes, he did, sir. And he just asked how. And she says, I asked him at the end if he wanted to make any changes. He said no. There were many, many questions he went down, trying to prove and make it clear to everybody in the court that Mr. Cedric Lim was not induced, pressured, threatened, and, were the statements accurate? Of course, that's the prosecution's case, right? Which Cedric said did not happen in his previous testimony in court at the last tranche of proceedings. So the prosecution was trying to argue and check with Ms. Zahra if that was indeed the case, right? Trying to make a case that perhaps Mr. Cedric Lim's statements to the police and MOH were true, right? That's their case. Ms. Zahra says, no, we didn't threaten. I didn't threaten him in any way. Prosecution says, before this statement, did you have any access to any police investigations? Ms. Zahra says, no, citing that she was not in any way involved in inducing him, threatening him, coercing him, nothing of the sort that Mr. Cedric had claimed. He was basically asking her if she had a part in it, and she's saying, not really, not at all. And one part, this was interesting, in P41, the prosecution says, one of the paragraphs says, how did you know Iris Ko? And why did you ask that? Ms. Zahra said, because that's how the case came about, sir. Prosecution says, did he mention Iris Ko before you asked him about her? Ms. Zahra says, yes, he did at paragraph 2. And then towards the end, before Mr. Kwa's counsel started and asked for a break, 20 minutes, the prosecution finished with, did you have any knowledge about any conversation between Mr. Brian and Mr. Lim before the statement taking? Did you have any knowledge of the investigation outside taking Mr. Cedric Lim's statement? Basically trying to confirm and reaffirm from all possible angles that Ms. Zahra did not coerce Mr. Cedric Lim in any way to give the statements that he did. After the break was Dr. Kwa's lawyer's case. I unfortunately missed that. I walked in late by 10 minutes. So instead of coming back at 4:10 after the 20-minute break, which the counsel requested to prepare their case, in response to the prosecution's case, I missed that. I came back at 4:20. What I came back for was Mr. Chwa's cross-examination. His job, or rather his purpose of representing himself, is to absolve himself of all the charges against him, if any. He started very interestingly, again with the very detailed questions like, is my name here, is my name there, and waiting for Ms. Zahra to confirm by looking at the statement. Towards the end, he did ask Ms. Zahra a bunch of questions that exhibited that she had no knowledge of how to prepare a vaccine, what a vaccine would look like, and so on and so forth. Questions like, are you aware that saline can be used to dilute vaccines? To which she said no. And are you aware that saline is an ingredient in the Sinopharm vaccines? She said no. He said, did you investigate that? And I missed the rest of the sentence, but it was something along the lines of preparation of vaccines. Did you investigate that? She said no. Mr. Chwa said, I put it to you that if you have insufficient knowledge in the preparation of vaccines, this is me paraphrasing the sentence, and some other elaboration of that nature, basically to show and make her agree or ask her to agree. If she agrees that she doesn't really know how to prep a vaccine or know what it would look like. And she says, no, she doesn't. So basically, Mr. Chwa keeps making sure that Ms. Zahra doesn't know anything about vaccines, appearance, the tubes that they come in, the prep. He even asked her whether they're translucent or transparent liquids. She was like, I don't know. And so he asked, do you know anything about serology tests? She's like, no. And so did you ask Mr. Cedric if he's okay with any serology test or blood test to see if he's okay to prove the vaccination status? She's like, no. Mr. Chwa sort of concludes with, I put it to you that you lack, the English is not perfect, but I'm repeating his English, that you lack of sufficient medical knowledge to interpret COVID-19 serology blood test and did not perform them. And Ms. Zahra says yes. Mr. Chwa also says, do you agree that in the statement you have recorded, there is no record of any fake vaccination put up by myself or Dr. Kwa? And Ms. Zahra replies, if Mr. Cedric would have mentioned it to me, I would have put it up. But since there is nothing in the statement, I believe that Mr. Cedric did not mention this to me. And Mr. Chwa, satisfied, goes, that's all, Your Honor. Then Miss Iris takes over, representing herself. As you can imagine, Miss Iris has some questions on the matter as well. After some basic questions, she arrives at the question, do you know that this matter was taken over by the Ministry of Health? Implying that there was already a matter to be taken over. And Ms. Zahra says, at the time, Mr. Brian was the IO, so I was assisting him. I have no knowledge and I'm not privy to whether it was handed over to the SPF, if at all, whether it even came from the SPF, and so on. There were quite a few questions here. And Miss Iris, being an eloquent speaker and writer, speaks pretty fast, and I'm not an eloquent typer. I like to speak as well. So I'm not as good as typing quickly, but that was my understanding of that question. And at one point, Miss Iris went, were you doing Brian a favor or were you reporting to him? She was trying to understand Miss Zahara's involvement in this case. And Miss Zahara actually did not directly answer the question, but she gave a similarly satisfactory answer to which Miss Iris said, okay. And the answer she gave was, I basically handed over the statement to him after it was recorded. And Miss Iris said, okay. And Miss Iris said, would you agree with me that the proper way to conduct this interview would be questions and answers? And I'm paraphrasing here. And Miss Zahara said, yes, it would be. And Miss Iris says half of the statement before question 1, which is half the statement, was just a narrative, just paragraphs. Miss Zahara didn't understand the question and she replied with, yes, the narrative is there. And Miss Iris said, no, I'm trying to find out what would the questions have been that spun off this narrative. You must have asked him 5, 6, 7 questions, she says. And Miss Zahara said, word for word, I would probe him, yeah. And Miss Iris said, the absence of these 5, 6, 7 questions wouldn't give us a full picture, isn't it? That's me paraphrasing her question. And Miss Iris says, I disagree. And then Miss Iris says, I'm trying to understand why questions leading to this narrative wouldn't be recorded down and you start question 1 in the middle of a long narrative. Surely there must have been a few questions that would have led him to this narrative and all these paragraphs. And I'm paraphrasing here for her question. But that is the meaning. And Ms. Zahara says, different IOs of different styles of writing reports. This is the style we went with, to which there were some reactions from the audience. And there were quite a few questions and answers about whether Miss Iris started this whole thing, because I believe that's what Miss Iris is being implicated for, conspiracy. She was trying to explain through questioning Miss Zahara to the court and the judge how she was not the one who started this whole thing. And so she kept asking Miss Zahara about that phrase, Iris started this whole thing. I believe Miss Zahara did mention this earlier in her testimony today. I just mentioned that a while ago, because earlier in the testimony today to the prosecution, she had said, because that's how the case came about. I believe she was referring to that phrase, how the case came about. Miss Iris continued the questioning and Miss Zahara couldn't pinpoint to Cedric saying the words, Iris started this whole thing. And so I believe Miss Iris was quite satisfied with that. Miss Iris also said there was no mention about a fake vaccine, am I right? And Miss Zahara says, yes, he didn't. Also, I'm paraphrasing this next one, but Miss Iris said, can you confirm as the recorder that Cedric Lim never said that Iris coerced him to get fake saline or anything of the sort, correct? She had quite a few questions there. That's the paraphrase meaning. And Miss Zahara said, yes, Miss Ko, yes. And then Miss Iris ended her questioning as well. Then the judge was satisfied and moved on to the next part of the proceedings. And he also asked Miss Iris, do you want to put your case to Miss Zahara, Miss Iris? And Miss Iris said, yes. Or I believe maybe that was what Miss Iris should have done, but she stopped. And maybe the judge was reminding her, because the judge was guiding her as today. Earlier in the court, in part 1's video, you may have seen that she was deciding to represent herself. The judge did say at some point, you're doing well down this path, Miss Iris. You should be fine if you continue this way. The prosecution, I believe, wanted to rebut what Miss Iris had said about the narration part of the statement at the start. So they did ask her about that part of the statement. And the prosecution did say, explain the questions of the narrative section of the statement. Ms. Zahara said that she would have mentioned something, those 5, 6, 7 questions that Ms. Iris was asking about how she would have questioned, like how he was in the group, how he went for vaccinations and so on. More or less like a conversation style. The court was a little noisy at this point, so I couldn't really catch what they were saying. The prosecution did ask to clarify their case. Did you ask any questions in the narrative section and of the report? And I'm paraphrasing here, in a way that would frame Iris Ko. And Ms. Iris was like, no. And earlier in the questioning, she had also told Ms. Iris, I have nothing possible against you. I've never met you before, So she was stating and making it clear to the court that she had nothing to do with Mr. Cedric Lim allegedly being threatened or scared, as Mr. Lim had alleged in his testimony in the previous tranche. The prosecution said they would like to call the next witness, but that would only be at 5:30. And the judge started summing up everything and saying that things were going well and everybody had to be patient with each other and so on and so forth, because Mr. Chua and Miss Iris Ko were representing themselves. I frankly thought that he was going to allow the witness to be there at 5:30 and this would go till 10 p.m. But then he summed up and he said, no, so we're going to adjourn for today. And that's all the highlights I have for you today. I will try to turn the notes for this day into a blog article. And for those of you who are waiting for the 2nd September update, I'm so sorry, but it took me the last week or two to recuperate from the previous tranche of court proceedings and the non-stop videos and editing and so on to get back to my main life. And that took a while. I'm also a dad of a 6-year-old. If you're following on my channel where you see my vlogs, spiritual lessons, health tips, and other parts of my life. And yeah, it gets busy as a dad and online entrepreneur, which is basically morning to night. So I'm doing what I can to cover this. I basically had 3 hours of sleep last night as well. Um, so I'm going to turn the lengthy scripts into blog articles and have shorter videos like this. And hopefully that helps you guys out, keeps you entertained, and gives you the facts that you might be looking for about the case if you're unable to attend court. Thank you so much, and see you guys in the next one. Oh, and like and subscribe if you enjoy this. Take it easy. Bye bye.